Thank you very much. Ladies and gentlemen, when I was a kid and growing up, my father taught me one lesson. And he said, son, when two people agree on everything, be sure only one of them is doing the thinking. I heard many statements here, and all of us are thinking people. Let me say, perhaps I agree with 60%, I disagree with 20%, and I violently disagree with other 20%. So let me point out some of the things we've been talking about. First, if you're talking of water for domestic consumption only, and that's only two areas we have discussed in depth, water for domestic consumption, environment, and yesterday there was some discussion, little bit of food. Well, I think the biggest problem we are now facing in terms of water is not for domestic consumption, because at most, even if I assume the Singaporean study is correct and we provide 75 liters of clean water to everyone, we are talking of 8 to 9% of the water sources of the world, the water use of the world, which is a minor amount. I'd also like to suggest for your consideration, domestic water management is not a rocket science. We know the answers. We know what to do, but we don't do it. We talked about solutions. I would like to suggest for solutions, take a look at some very unlikely cities which have done remarkable things in the area of urban water management and wastewater management. Let me give you just two examples. I don't know how many of you know that Phnom Penh Water Supply Authority, a public sector autonomous corporation, has better performance indicator than London or Los Angeles. Yet, the meetings I go to, I don't hear about Phnom Penh. This authority, each year, this public sector authority, each year makes more profit than the previous year, and they have to pay enormous, and they pay full taxes. It's the only authority where you go to the slums of Phnom Penh. They don't know who is the Prime Minister of Cambodia, but they know who is the Director General of Phnom Penh Water Supply Authority. Why? Because when you talk to them, they will tell you that only person who has done anything for the poor is this Director General who changed the water supply completely within a very short period of time, made it a self-sustaining financial model. Phnom Penh municipal government does not give a single cent for the running of the corporation, this public sector corporation. The users pay for it. The slum houses are directly connected with water. They get 24-hour water supply which you can drink from the tap. And it's not subsidized, except for the poor, it's not subsidized at all. The middle class and the rich pay for it. That is one model you may wish to take a look at. For 40 years I've been saying water management, the world is not facing a water crisis. World is not facing an issue of water scarcity. We do, however, facing a management crisis. I can go to any part of the city, any part of the world, finding a solution to the water scarcity, even the word water scarcity, I have some problem with it. The solutions are there. We're not using it for various reasons. Let me give you another example, because if you're talking of domestic water use, we have to talk of reuse and recycling. And when we talk of reuse and recycling, we start thinking of it must be the developed countries that are way ahead. Well, ladies and gentlemen, if you want to talk of reuse and recycling, don't go to Chicago, don't go to London, don't go to Melbourne, go to Windhoek in Namibia. There, for the last 40 years, they're treating their wastewater and directly putting it into their domestic water supply system. Directly. They haven't had any problem for 40 years. So success stories are there, but we are not looking at it. We have done one on Singapore water story. Why did Singapore succeed? The answer is very simple. Singapore had a prime minister who thought water is a strategic issue. We are water people here. We think the sun and the moon and the world revolves around water. Well, I have to tell you, I've been advising 20 countries at the Prime Minister's, Chief Minister, or the Planning and Finance Minister level. I have not met one who is interested in water. They are interested in water only when there's a flood or a drought or a natural disaster. The day the flood goes, the day the drought is over, the day the natural disaster is over, water disappears from their political agenda. And water problems need a long-term support. Now in Singapore, why in 1965 it was a below average in terms of urban water management city? In 1965 it was below any average third world city. How in 20 years' time it became one of the leading urban water management example in the world, and it still is. One primary reason, in my view, the Prime Minister of Singapore, Lee Kuan Yew, in 1965 realized water is a strategic resource. Dr. Tortada and I have written a book on Singapore water story. It has been translated into several languages. And during our discussion with Lee Kuan Yew told us that all other development policies, because water is a strategic resource, all other development policies bend at the knees for water. If you have an industrial policy, food, agricultural policy, any policy, that has to be looked from the lens of water. And he had 3 people in his office, in the Prime Minister's office, who decided how they're going to look at it. I don't see that type of commitment anywhere in the world. I don't see a single Prime Minister who has been consistently interested in water like Lee Kuan Yew was for almost 30 years. So the political commitment is missing. How do we do that? That's a very difficult question. The second point I would like to make is we talked of water as a human right. Professor Eckstein made a very good statement yesterday, and I agree with him. It was passed by the UN General Assembly. The resolution was passed. But the facts are 122 countries approved it. No one voted against it because everyone believes everybody should have access to water. 41 abstained. Major countries in them like Australia, Austria, Canada, Israel, Turkey, United Kingdom, USA, they abstained. 29 neither voted for it, did not abstain from it. And UN General Assembly resolutions are not binding. Only bindings are Security Council resolutions, even those many countries are ignoring now. So until and unless the governments of the countries decide water is a human right, I don't think we are going to make much progress. But once we talk water is a human right, we have to think about what are the responsibilities of the consumers as well. We cannot provide free water or subsidized water. There is simply not enough water. So, in order to have investment in water and wastewater, people who can afford to pay must pay. Poor must receive a targeted subsidy. My colleague here said 3% in household income. The thesis we have put forward is because household income is 2% on water bill, they should receive subsidy. In Singapore, the water price was increased by 30% this Monday after 17 years. The average household income compared to the water cost of an average household now is roughly 0.45%, not even 3%. Nobody knows what their water bill is. Most Singaporeans do not know what water bill is. The subsidy system they have is quite interesting in the sense that subsidy does not come out of the pocket of the water utility. The Social Security Department gives the people considered not so well off a voucher for water and electricity use. You can use it for water, you can use it for electricity, whatever you want, but the water authority gets paid in full because the subsidy comes from the pocket of the government, but not from the pocket of the water utility. Now, the last comment I want to make is on the public and private sector. For 20 years, I think it's been a red herring. Which is good, public sector or private sector? My thesis is very simple. If the public sector can provide water efficiently at a reasonable cost to everybody, including the poor, good luck to it. If the private sector can do a better job, good luck to it. And I learned this in 1983 when I saw Deng Xiaoping, the head of Chinese government. He told me, "Professor, I don't care whether a cat is white, black, or gray. Only thing I want to know, can the cat catch the mice?" I'll use the same analogy and say, it's irrelevant public sector or private sector, who can provide the better service. And if you can better service, that is good. Now the other issue I heard quite a few here, that business is bad. Well, I have to tell you, some governments that are good, most governments are average or mediocre, the rest are not so good. Same goes with academics, same goes with NGOs. Business is the same. There are some very good business people, very good business CEOs, and I give you two examples of what they have done, because I was disappointed by many of the comments made about the private sector. The enlightened private sector is way ahead of the game than the government. Nestle and Unilever, if you're talking of rights to water, they have provided clean water to school, thousands of schools, and I suspect, Greg, probably you might say Coca-Cola has done that, Procter & Gamble, and not only provided that, they make sure they're properly maintained. They've provided latrines for the girls, it's private sector, but we have not seen very many statements saying what they have done. So private sector can play, at least the enlightened private sector can play and will play a major role in making human rights to water possible. So don't exclude any of them, but rather look as an inclusive group where everyone can play its part. And my last comment is, the famous poet W.H. Auden said, "Thousands have lived without love, but no one has lived without water." So you have to make it sure that people have access to water. Thank you very much.